Hello and welcome to the Notts TV Debate, the show that digs into the news with a big old Nottinghamshire spade. I'm Frances Finn and I'm here to referee our panellists, who I hope will have different views on the news. So say hello to Reverend Dr. Ian Paul, who's a theologian and writer based in Nottingham. Hello. Christine Bacon is retired and enjoying her life in Mansfield. And we have Cllr Will Mee, who represents Kimberley for Labour on Broxtowe Borough Council, and he's also a student. Welcome to you all. Now, there is a lot going on in the world. I'm going to start us off very close to home and the Ratcliffe-on-Soar power station towers. This is dividing Nottinghamshire. Should we preserve them, keep them there as a monument to the history of Nottinghamshire's coal-fired power station, or should we demolish and make way for the future? That is the plan, to get rid of them, but there's a big local campaign that says, no, let's keep them. And among the campaigners, James Graham, local author, writer of Sherwood and other top dramas. He thinks they're just part of our history. A concrete cathedral or a concrete carbuncle, Ian?
Oh, a carbuncle that we're used to, and being used to something is difficult from it being beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, we like to walk down to Attenborough Nature Reserve and you look across the beautiful vista and the trees and the water, and then on the horizon, oh, okay, there's the cooling towers. And I mean, yes, we're used to it. And there are some beautiful pictures posted on, Facebook and Beeston Update and all that, of the sun setting between the towers. But honestly, they are an eyesore. They got to go.
You see, I can liken this to the Clipston headstocks because people think they should go, but they're part of history, so I like them there. With regard to the cooling station, I don't think it's right to close it. Couldn't we just mothball it? I mean, we need it, don't we?
Well, the whole power station is closed down now. It was deactivated for the final time on Monday last week.
Mothballed it? I mean, because it was, when did we last use it?
On Monday.
There you go.
Yeah.
Maybe, with this winter fuel allowance, maybe it would have come. Don't get me started on the winter fuel allowance.
I mean, I think it's a long-held debate over the future of coal, and I think this nation is celebrating the fact that we are the first UK country to be coal-free in the G7, in fact, in the world. And that's seen as a good thing because we want to be using sustainable energy. We don't want to be relying on these enormous coal-guzzling power stations that are chucking this smoke out into the air. People that ran the power plant, they said they'd done a lot to make it as clean as they possibly could, but it is the end. There's no going back. The question is, do we want the towers to stay there for us to look at?
Well, I think for me, the main concern I've got is not the towers, it's the site itself, and actually using that site to invest in green infrastructure. You've got that whole area, it's like the Nottingham Freeport, which I know the East Midlands Devolved Authority is looking into quite considerably. You've got East Midlands Parkway train station, which needs a lot of new housing built near that. Currently, it doesn't really serve much of a purpose. But when it comes to the actual towers, I don't really have a view either way. I think my main concern is let's get that site going, let's get some green infrastructure in, and then we can make the decision on the towers.
The site hopefully is going to be where the future of energy is going to be developed. There's going to be a new infrastructure there. There'll be new jobs created, so they say. But
it's very different though from the colliery examples, because the collieries were the heart of the community. Generations of people had their livelihood on it.
Yes.
That's not true for there were some people who were
200
there, but it
jobs, I think, at the moment.
Yeah, but 200 jobs is very different from being the heart of a town life, generation after generation. I mean, for most of us, it's just a view, it's not.
Is it though?
And
is it one of those iconic landmarks of Nottinghamshire? And everyone driving along the M1, oh, we're in Nottinghamshire now. They're the cooling towers. Is it something that we need to keep hold of? It's part of our identity, Will.
I think there is an argument in that, to be honest, because every time you come back in, you see them and you know where you are. You know what I mean?
I'm nearly home.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing that's keeping this argument going.
You could just look at the signs on the train station, as you go past which station you come into. But
What's going to happen is they're going to blow them up, and then in 50 years' time, there'll be some modern artist who's going to get paid millions of pounds to create this wonderful sculpture, and it'll be in the shape of a cooling tower right by the M1.
Well, my son lives right next to Battersea Power Station, which has been converted into a big art gallery and centre and all that kind of stuff. If you could do something like that with them, then great, but you can't.
They're quite big, aren't they? Should we just keep one?
No.
It's got to be all or nothing. I think you can't. It's a bit weird having one.
It would.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's move on and talk about something else that's been covered in our local news. And that is what's happening to Nottingham's only lap dancing club. So this is called Flirts, as you well know. It's on Friar Lane, and it's allowed lap dancing, but not naked lap dancing until now. Also, it only allowed over 21s in. The owners of the club challenged the regulations in the city, and there was a hearing with the City Council and a barrister representing Flirts. And this is what they've decided. Yes to naked lap dancing in an upstairs room, and yes to under 21s. Nottinghamshire police aren't happy. They say no. There are many under 21-year-olds in the city. This is the first time they've been away from home. They're not mature enough to cope with this kind of a thing. But Flirt says you can vote. You can look at porn on your phone. You can pretty much do anything as an adult when you're 18. Why not go to a lap dancing club and get the full effect? Your instinct on this. Let's talk about the full nudity first of all, maybe.
Well, I won't be going, but you know, I don't really think it's a good idea. But then maybe that's my age, is it? I definitely think that I do agree with keeping it at 21 because, you know, as you've said, a lot of students are here, and I think let's wait till the students have left, leave at 21, and then they can make their own mind up. I think now I do get, even though you can do everything else at 18, I actually think it is better to stay at 21. But with the nudity, I don't know what to say really. What shall I say? What do you think?
Well, how old are you?
I'm 20, so.
So you would not be
I wouldn't be
allowed
allowed
in that
Well, I wouldn't be now,
nightclub
so,
had
yeah.
it stayed the same under those rules. What do you make of that?
I mean, to be honest, it's not something I'm particularly passionate to advocate for. But I will
are
say,
you mature enough to cope with a naked lady dancing in front of you?
No, well, it depends on the wages. No,
Yeah.
but no, I mean, I have to say, I think it's kind of like, as you've said, if people can access pornography, you know, at 18, it's not much different to that. I think if you're in somewhere like that anyway, you know, on the nudity side, I don't see why it's not really any much of a step more than what it already is. It's just it's a lap dancing club anyway. It's not exactly going to be, you know, that was a problem. But I think I kind of understand the argument saying, you know, if you're under 21, maybe you're just arrived at university and all this. But if you are 18, you can make the decisions for yourself, and we believe in a free market. So if they want to do it, I'm not passionate either way, if you see what I mean.
Yes,
but
yes.
you know.
But I suppose it's whether or not you want to be full-on libertarian, you know, if it's not illegal. 18 seems to be the age for consent for most things now. Why make this one particular nightclub different? However, if you're a parent sending your son off to university in Nottingham, is this going to play on your mind a bit, Ian? I don't know. What's your sense of it?
Well, it's a strange thing, isn't it? I mean, as a Christian, I think that sex belongs within marriage, so I'm not going to be encouraging anybody to go there.
People aren't having sex there.
No, they're not. But I can't expect to impose my values on culture. But here's the interesting thing: what do we want our culture to be like? So, what is it at the moment? What we see teenage girls suffering from elevated levels of mental stress, mental health problems. We see the sexualization of society because porn is so easily available on our phones. We keep talking about the problems of toxic masculinity, where men treat women as objects. Well, do we think that's a bad thing or not? If we're concerned about any of these issues, why would we make a move which is simply going to make all those things worse? Why? Why would we do it? Why would we agree to it? Why would we agree to a libertine ethic which actually is going to make all those problems worse? Shouldn't we be, if we're really serious about it, shouldn't we be making decisions the opposite way?
And I guess the council can decide what kind of establishments it wants and what kind of rules it wants to have in place. But do you think it's a little bit old-fashioned, that view, Will, that we should be protecting these girls from something actually they might say they're very willingly doing, and it's a very good way for them to make a living? They're empowered, they're using their bodies, they're proud of their bodies.
Yeah, I can understand that point. I do understand what's been said, to be fair, on the values side, and I think pornography is a big problem in society. I'm not going to deny that. But I think at the same time, if we live in a free market and these people have entered this consensually, then it's difficult to clamp down on it. I think the argument that's been presented, you'd have to. I mean, you probably would agree with this. You would have to shut the institution down. I think changing it to 18 and 21, it's still going to be the same thing. You'd have to shut the whole institution down. So I guess if that is the argument that you presented, fair enough. But
it's not empowering to women to allow men to objectify them, even if they choose to.
Yeah, but the women have decided it's their decision. Nobody's making them do it.
Well, I think you're naive there. Women do not go into the sex industry out of free choice. I mean, we're just being really naive, we think that, on the one hand. On the other hand, we can't make decisions which have an impact on how people are going to treat others. What impact is this going to have on other women? So men coming out of the club and they meet women walking down the street, what impact is that going to have on wider society? It's not going to have no impact. Do we want that kind of impact?
So actually,
we do.
Interesting though, Christine, that you think if a woman wants to do that...
Definitely. I think it's like, the Miss World contest, Miss United Kingdom, all that. It's their choice to do it. A lot of people are against that sort of thing, aren't they? And it is their choice. Nobody's making them do it. Well, they could have other careers and earn money a different way.
We're running out of time before the adverts, but some would say that the culture sets the parameters, and it's our culture that, if Ian is right, objectifies women that leads to the demand for this, and therefore how free are these women to really choose? It's a very big and philosophical argument, and we haven't got time to cover it now. Come back after the break. Who do you prefer, Rishi Sunak or Keir Starmer? Don't go away. Hello and welcome back to the Notts TV debate with me, Francis Finn, and your three panellists this week, Reverend Dr. Ian Paul, Christine Bacon and Cllr Will Mee. Now, there's been quite a lot said about the new Labour government and how you think they're doing. Of course, with the winter fuel payment being withdrawn, this has attracted a lot of column inches, as we used to say, a lot of social media and a lot of debate. So what are you thinking of Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister versus Keir Starmer? I'm asking because it was the subject of a poll, and a small majority said actually we'd rather have Rishi Sunak's government back than Keir Starmer's. A third of Labour voters said they wish they hadn't voted Labour. So yeah, this is, I think, around the winter fuel payment. It's around perhaps the freebies. We'll come on to that in a minute. But let's ask you, Keir Starmer or Rishi Sunak right now? What are you thinking, Ian?
We do not have a presidential system of government, so we shouldn't even be talking about this. We talk about our Prime Minister as if they're the ones who make all the decisions. We don't.
For the sake of this argument, Labour or Conservative?
Okay, well
that's how we work.
That's a better question.
Given that's how we work. However, I mean, I think it is Keir Starmer's personality and the way he's been slightly phrasing things with the doom and gloom that he has got to take some responsibility for the rating of the Labour government.
We do, but, and this is the bizarre thing in the election, what were the Conservatives trying to say? We're in a terrible situation, we're going to change everything. So, well, who created this terrible situation? I mean, they were a bit of onto a loser, weren't they? I mean, I suppose I'm not a political expert. We have a political expert here, but my observation is we've got so many major problems with our political system. Whether we choose Starmer or Sunak is a bit like saying, do you want to be hit over the head with a mallet on the one hand or a stick on the other? I mean, we just need to rethink. We need proportional representation. We need to get the right people into government and not ambitious politicians. I mean, goodness me, do you know, Germany recently, their Secretary of State for Health was a doctor. Well, how about that? What a good idea that would be. And we've got failure on education, on health, on so many things because we have no continuity. We have short-term thinking with regular elections. We need to think longer term, and we need to think, and we need to pull out all those lobbying companies as well, who are big business making too many decisions in Parliament. So I think there's lots of bigger questions for me.
Well, back to my question, if you don't mind.
I was going to come back to one of the things you said there about not having experts in government. Well, actually appointed Patrick Vallance as a science minister, also appointed a barrister as the Attorney General.
The best appointment was Timpson.
Absolutely, yeah.
That was a fantastic appointment. That was really, really good.
So he is putting experts in government.
All right, I think we probably can guess what your view is in a minute as a Labour councillor. Christine, what do you make of this new Labour government so far? End of term report, they've been in 3 months. What mark are you giving them?
I think they're dreadful. I think Keir Starmer, don't get me started. I think he's completely devoid of emotion. He seems to have no feelings. Then they come in with the winter fuel allowance, which is horrendous. Put VAT on private schools. all this clothing, free clothing, I mean, what have they done right since they've
Why
got
are you
in?
judging him on whether you think he looks emotional on TV? Is that what really matters?
No, I don't.
Isn't that just a superficial
No,
thing?
I think he doesn't have any feelings.
Come on.
He does
How can
not.
you say? Have you met him?
No, I've not met him. You can tell he's got no emotion. Oh, why wouldn't he feel for the elderly people that are going to struggle this winter?
That's not about feelings, it's about policy.
I was going to say on that, he's committed to the triple lock. That's an 8.5% rise in the state pension, which is 4 times in inflation.
The difference is, though, I mean, yes, it's important to say that because that's what the government is saying, that Christine, by April next year, there'll be something like a £1,400 uplift in the state pension,
Absolutely.
which does outweigh the winter fuel payment.
And pension credit as well, unclaimed pension credit, millions of pounds in that.
However, it's the in-year saving that they needed to make. So this year, before the increase in the pension, there will be pensioners who are saying this is going to cause them to be very stressed and probably cold this winter.
This highlights the problem we've got, which is that we keep judging politicians on superficial social media stuff, rather than actually having a discussion about issues around policy.
Well, this is a policy. Christine has just flagged the winter fuel payment being withdrawn.
Well, let's talk about policy. I think that's fine.
No, but it's terrible. I find it really, really sad that he's done that. And they're not going to do a U-turn on it, but they should do. Why can't they admit it's a mistake? Surely the first thing he comes in is hit the pensioners. It's horrendous. Was there no other way he could have made a saving?
So, were you surprised to see this? I mean, just being honest, were you surprised that the new Labour government, the first one in 14 years, chose as its first major public cost-saving decision to be something that hits the vulnerable in our society?
Well, it's interesting that the Conservatives are the ones complaining about this. Who brought this payment in? It was us. It was the Labour Party that brought this payment in. And they didn't. So actually, that's an interesting point. Obviously, I don't have an insight myself into the actual what they're going to do in cabinet. But as I say, 8.5% raise in the state pension, millions and millions of pounds of unclaimed pension credit. It could be thousands of pounds on the doorstep. The amount of people that have said to me, we don't need this money. I met a bloke and he said, why am I getting it? Yeah, I usually buy my wife a coat or a bag with it. And there was a woman I was talking to in the swimming pool, and she said, "Oh, I use it for Christmas shopping."
Oh no, it's not everybody needs it. I could say probably I'm one of those. It doesn't make me, but I still feel for those that are going to really struggle.
Have they cut it completely, or have they cut it?
No, it's being
means tested to those that are on pension credit. No, but
and that is the other really annoying thing. To fill in forms for these elderly people is a massive job. A lot of them won't get round to it.
So just to be clear on who gets it, that only those on pension credit, which are the ones that aren't really getting the full state pension. So we're not talking, okay, Mick Jagger doesn't get it anymore. We're saying that only the very poorest, the very, very poorest will be getting the winter fuel payment.
Mick Jagger will be satisfied with that, won't he?
I think...
Oh, thank you.
I mean, it's been. I think I want to talk about the positive things that we've delivered. We're nationalising the railways, which is something that over 60% of Conservative voters support, and we've seen particularly in Nottingham, we've got Cross Country and East Midlands Railway, which are some of the worst performing operators in the country. So
yes,
that is absolutely incredible.
I think what this has done, though, and the polls reflect it, is that a decision that's going to save less than £2 billion, which is basically changed down the back of the Exchequer's sofa, has lost the confidence of the nation. Do you not
ridiculous. Think? It gave the Tories 14 years of consistent failure. 14 years, and in 3 months they say, "Oh, it's all country's going to the dogs. It's all ruined because of this decision."
But no, I think it's bigger than that, though, Ian and Christian. I think it's when you think you're putting your cross in the box for the party that says it cares about the poor and the vulnerable. Yeah. The very first thing they come in and do is take the rug from underneath those very people.
Well, it
feels bigger.
It's being means tested. But can I just draw attention?
Only for the very, very,
Can
very
I draw attention to something else which I think is really important, which never really hits the headlines, and something that I've been really interested in for a long time is prisons policy. I've done quite a lot of work in visiting people in prison. There's someone in the category prison here who wanted to learn biblical Hebrew, so I went in and used to teach him, and the sex offenders prison down the road as well I've been to. Our prisons policy is catastrophic, and the appointment of James Timpson is really a great thing.
To be clear, who he is?
James Timpson is the son of John Timpson with the Timpson shoe thing,
right.
And they've always had a policy of, I think they aim to employ 10% of their workforce are prisoners.
Yeah.
And because the key thing, which we've completely failed at in our prison system, is rehabilitation.
Yes.
And that's why we're overflowing, and we have the highest reoffending rates in Europe, because we haven't invested in that. And he's someone who's got expertise and a passion and is really going to make a difference to that. And over the this is not a short-termism, this is going to take 5-10 years to implement, but actually it's going to make a huge difference to society at once.
So there's
that's
that.
really important.
Yeah, very
Fantastic.
good. Very good. One thing that you've been really delighted about, in addition to what you've already said, Will, just to put the views of the Labour Party across.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, devolution is something that I'm so keen on. I'm fed up with people in London telling me what to do about a place they haven't got a clue about.
Was this not a Conservative idea?
Devolution was not a Conservative idea, no.
It was certainly for instance, East Midlands mayoral election was carried out under the Conservative government.
The mayoral is a positive step forward, but it's nowhere near enough devolution that we need. If London gets an assembly, if Wales gets an assembly, if Scotland gets a parliament, these people have got more democratic rights than us, and we don't get that. Why not?
Okay, so that's something you're very pleased about.
But it illustrates the fact that you can't simply take a lot of these issues and divide them on party lines. Whether you should devolve government and have more local, regional government, that shouldn't be a party political issue. Our strategy on the health service, it can't be a party political issue. We've got to have a bigger conversation to fix these big things.
Okay. Now, there's just one more thing before the break. And the other thing that's been catching the headlines is the gifts given to Labour leaders, the clothing, the tickets and whatnot. And it should be said, these are within the rules. What do you make of all of this, Christine, as someone who's voiced your opposition so far? Do we need to be so worried about these things?
I think that
it's okay to accept
I don't know.
freebies.
I can imagine that MPs and the Prime Minister, they are going to be given things. It's just part of life. And I think somebody's leaked that. However, I think it is appalling that they accept free tickets. And I think some clothes, some free tickets might be okay. But what they've accepted is unbelievable. And Angela Rayner has spouted in the past about what Conservatives have taken, and now she's doing it herself. I mean,
not to the same, I think, monetary value, but go on.
You're talking, I think it's like Rishi Sunak as this time probably took about 600 grand or something, and Keir Starmer's in total about 100 grand. So I'm not, sitting here and making a judgment on that, but...
as a general thing...
How do we know exactly how much they've had in clothes, how much Rishi Sunak got?
They have to declare it, so it's allowed. So my question, just very briefly, should politicians be allowed to accept freebies? A lot of the broadcast corporations, for instance, are not allowed to accept gifts. Should they be allowed to? Exactly. Should they be allowed to?
Well, we need consistent rules. If it's within the rules, don't give it back. If it's outside the rules, you shouldn't do it in the first place. But what we need to do is get the rules right.
Well, on Broxtowe Council, we have to declare any gift over £25. So I think, to be fair, look, it needs changing. I don't disagree with that, but I think it's a case of Taylor Swift tickets. Is there really going to be any lobbying result?
Inland revenue workers aren't allowed to have gifts. Why should our politicians, who are very influential?
Isn't it not declaring it, though, that's been the big issue? Because they haven't declared it and then somebody leaks it.
No, they have declared it.
It's all declared, it's all legal, yeah.
No, but there are things that they haven't declared.
Well,
most of the Conservatives.
On that, we will just pause and we'll come back after a short break because there's plenty more to discuss on the Notts TV debate. Welcome back to the Notts TV debate. We are having a great chat about the news from a Nottinghamshire perspective, and that's thanks to our three panellists, who are Reverend Dr. Ian Paul, Christine Bacon and Cllr Will Mee. I'm Frances Finn. Let's get stuck into quite a difficult subject, which is in our news again. Now, this is something that Dame Esther Ranson brought to the public for again recently when she announced that she was in stage 4 of lung cancer. She has signed up with Dignitas so that when the time comes, she will go to Switzerland alone, she says, and take the decision to end her life. She wants there to be a legal right in this country for assisted dying, so she doesn't have to take those steps. She says it's so that families will be spared the pain of watching their loved ones suffer and to have those abiding memories of them. She wants to spare her family from that. So, 15 years ago, government voted on whether or not this should be looked into further, and the answer was no. The MPs voted against. The update is there will be another vote. There will be a bill submitted, and Labour MP Kim Ledbetter has put forward the bill. It will be debated, and later on this year, there is expected to be a full debate and a vote. So the question is, how should they vote? Christine, can I start with you on this one? What's your instinct on this?
I agree with it. I think they should be allowed to die. I mean, I myself, I'm not frightened of dying, but I am frightened of how I might die, in pain, in dignity. You know, that you need complete care, and I think it's horrendous. I mean, if anything, I don't actually think it goes far enough, because just briefly, I lost an aunt. She was 80. She was amazing. She walked miles with her dog. Suddenly had a stroke. She had 3 years without being able to talk, speak, or move. So she couldn't make that decision, could she? I mean, I would have happily made it for her, because knowing her, she didn't want to live 3 years like that. It was horrendous. So I just think almost it could go further. I do agree with.
What are you suggesting, that a family can make the decision on behalf of a loved one?
I would think so, in something like that.
And you wouldn't worry that should you find yourself in a situation where you're not able to make that decision for yourself, but actually you're at peace, you're happy to let nature take its course, you wouldn't worry that your family would be nudging you off towards, maybe not your family, but you know, that is the fear, isn't it? The pressure.
Is. I don't think they would nudge me off, but I just don't think.
What if you didn't have a caring family? You're talking about your family.
Yes.
What about other people?
Yeah, but in this, just given that I've described, of 3 years with no ability to do anything, do you think that person should just continue living then?
Well, in this context, people always say hard cases make bad law, and if we take the worst and the hardest cases and determining the whole policy, we're going to end up in trouble. I think there are some medical questions around this, but there are much bigger sort of philosophical questions about what do we believe about what it means to be human, what kind of culture do we want to live in. The medical reality is that we have got incredibly well-developed palliative care in the UK. And the reality is that countries where they begin to legalise this, their palliative care system just disappears overnight. And the research evidence shows...
Do you think that's a slight exaggeration?
Okay, yeah, maybe. All right, I'm exaggerating. We're on TV. But suddenly these provisions disappear. And as I understand it, the research evidence is that old people do feel pressure in those countries because now they're a burden. And one of the tragic cases is where young people who feel suicidal say they can't bear the pain and they want to die. And we know, I mean, my wife's a GP and she deals with a lot of people with mental health problems. And we know that people go through phases like this and they then come out of it at the end. And if we introduce this sort of legislation, there's a real danger that those sort of situations are going to disappear.
So the proposal is understood to be something along the lines of other nations where they have a criteria where if doctors say you've probably not got more than 6 months to live, then you qualify for the decision to have your life ended. So we're not talking any old person can say, right, that's it, finish me off, if you allow the paraphrasing.
Well, the question is, when you make that change, what's the next change? I mean, you just mentioned we had a vote a few years ago, we're going to have another vote. When we have that vote, if it goes through, what's the next vote going to be? I'm not aware of any country which has ever gone back in the opposite direction.
Do you think people should just be allowed to suffer? I mean, it's terrible. A friend of mine died with motor neurone disease. I mean, that is horrendous.
And I've had friends who've done the same.
Yeah. Well, you think they should just have to stick it out and suffer?
No, I don't think they should just suffer. But the question is, well, in our society, we believe that we want to care for the vulnerable, and the two times we're most vulnerable is at birth and at death. And do we find what it means to be human by eliminating all pain from our lives? Pain comes and pain is terrible. And the question is, do we try our best to alleviate that pain and support people, or do we try and eliminate it?
Well, as I drove here this morning, there was one case where there was no painkillers, no morphine, nothing could help the pain.
Let me bring Will in on this. So what we're hearing here, just to draw these threads, Christine, your fear is that there is going to be suffering beyond which pain relief can mitigate, and it's for those people you feel bad for. I think, Ian, you're saying, why not concentrate on improving palliative care rather than shoving people off towards their death
and
more
there's
quickly?
A medical question about whether it is true that there is pain that cannot be relieved.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, I don't know if that's the case, but what I say is, on an assisted death, it's kind of like if you don't agree with assisted death, you don't have to have an assisted death. No. So but why does that mean that you should block somebody else's right?
That's a very
It's
good
the
point.
same with gay marriage. It's like, if you don't believe in gay marriage, then don't have a gay marriage. But other people should be allowed to.
Yeah.
And you say, what's the next step? What's the next step? You could say that about anything. People said that when they said, letting women vote. Say, what's the next step? Letting children vote, something ridiculous. Like,
Well, just to come back at you there, one of the well-rehearsed arguments at the moment is that even if that person themselves wouldn't choose it, they know that in their family's minds it's an option. And therefore, if they feel like they're a burden and, gosh, my family's got to come and visit me again today, I mean, I suppose I ought to.
I don't agree with that.
But the research
I don't
evidence shows
agree with
that
that.
is
It's
what
not just
happens.
being feeling a burden, it's that they are in pain, they are suffering, they're probably in a nappy and all that sort of thing. It's not just...
For those people, yes, it would seem an appropriate option, but there are people, as with all issues, there are people on the dividing line. It's not a yes or no or a black or white thing, is it? And so for those that are...
You could say that now, though, couldn't you?
Is there pressure?
You could say there's pressure now. Like, you could say that, there might be pressure to make somebody not carry on with chemotherapy or something like that. Or withdraw life support, which was the case with, I think it was Pope John Paul II, which the church was against euthanasia, but they weren't against it when it came to him, they withdrew his life support. So I don't,
I mean, that's an interesting point, Ian. We are told that actually the phrase should be assisted suicide because there is assisted dying going on all the time within the palliative care sector. Just increasing a terminally ill patient's morphine.
Yes.
Maybe they've passed into unconsciousness, you increase their morphine, you're going to bring their death nearer. It happens all the time.
But within medical thinking, there's a clear distinction between bringing about a death which wouldn't otherwise happen or allowing death to happen as a consequence of necessary medication. And those two things are seem to be quite different. They look very close ethically, but within the medical profession, I understand they're seen very differently.
And what would you say to those, it's the whole thing about we wouldn't let our pets suffer, why do we allow our people to suffer?
Because we are not animals, that's why. And because we live with this idea in our culture that what is paramount is our dignity and our free choice. Well, actually, there's an awful lot of things in life we don't have freedom about. I didn't choose my parents, I didn't choose my genes, I didn't choose my personality. We don't find our fulfillment by simply having free choice about everything and making our own lives. We do find our humanity by living with dignity in the times when we don't have choices.
Let me just bring something else in, because I think it's we don't often talk about subjects like this, and there's a lot to it, as you've identified. The medical profession, some doctors are saying, hang on, we don't want to have to be the ones. We've trained our whole lives to keep people alive. We want to make people better, we want to improve the quality of their lives, we want to lengthen their lives, and now you would be saying to us, you make the decision, you administer the drugs.
But they do
what would you
make
say
that
to those
decision,
medics?
don't they, Fran? When they take people off life support machines, doctors do have to make that decision sometimes. They can make that decision. And it's two doctors and...
I think that's a little bit different, isn't it? Where a person is only being kept alive by a machine, you would be giving them a substance which means that they face certain death.
Yeah.
And they're very careful protocols in that situation, and it isn't the decision of the doctors, actually. It's always in consultation with the next of kin.
It's not just the doctors, though. It's two doctors and a barrister that's making this decision, is it? Or a judge. Yeah. And also, I think that could take a lot of doing. Say, how long would it take to get through all that? Take a long time to get to that agreement. But, I mean, I'm sort of interested in how you see it from being a man of the cloth, from that point of view.
Well, I think it's how I've articulated. It's about where do we find our dignity? What does it mean to be human? And I think the idea that we have our true humanity expressed by our complete freedom of choice about how and when we die and how and where we live. Actually, I think is a myth, and it's a damaging myth as well, because we don't. Our society is driven by the idea that we have free choice, but actually imposing that idea on people, it can be very damaging and enslaving, because a lot of people don't have free choice.
I should come in there and say
there are bishops
within the Church of England who come public with their support for the bill as well. So actually, those
It's a
are
very
people.
small number, but
Yes, you could say, but I mean, I think their argument would be medical science has progressed. We have these skills, talents, abilities, parameters, boundaries, a justice system that can protect the misuse of something that could be to the benefit of people and their dignity.
The big priority, I think, from a Christian point of view, is that life is a gift that we've been given, and we are to be good stewards of that.
But you'd probably think it was wrong then for you to do it, because if you're guided by God, then presumably would it be a sin to end your life?
Gosh, that's a really big
that's a
question
big
when we've only got
question,
20 seconds left to go. I think we'll leave that for
Thank you for
a different
raising the
debate, if you like. But thank you very much. We're going to come back after the break and we'll talk about the Newark MP, Robert Jenrick. He wants to be the leader of the Conservative Party and the next Prime Minister, of course. Are you backing his leadership race? Back in a minute. Welcome back to the final part of the Notts TV debate. I'm Frances Finn, joined by Reverend Dr. Ian Paul, Christine Bacon and Councillor Will Mee. So let's talk about local politician Robert Jenrick. He is the MP for Newark and a former cabinet minister, of course, until he resigned over the Rwanda plan, saying it didn't go far enough. So he wants to be the next leader of the Conservative Party. And part of his pitch as to why the Conservative Party should choose him is that he is tough on immigration. So do you think he should be the next leader? Does he have your backing? Might be nice to have a local person as the leader of the party, the Conservative Party. Will Mee, Labour councillor.
Well, you'd be surprised I'm not backing any of them. But I would say, you know, I've actually met Robert Jenrick very briefly. You probably won't even remember meeting me. It was in Newark, and I was campaigning for our candidate in Newark, Sadhu, who's a good friend of mine, who would have been an excellent candidate if she'd beaten him. But, you know, talking about stuff like bringing immigration down to the tens of thousands, it's just not feasible. You know, it's not feasible in a 5-year term. You need about 50 years to do that. He's promising things he can't deliver, which we know the Conservatives like doing. But it's just, you know, resigning over saying the Rwanda plan doesn't go far enough after he'd already wasted $400 million on it. You know, that's crazy, a crazy
Christine,
view to
you
me.
were rolling your eyes a bit there.
No, because they do things they can't deliver, like Labour don't do the same sort of thing. I mean, but I suppose if he became Prime Minister, it'd be quite nice for us to have a Prime Minister from our area, wouldn't it? But I think he's all right. I think he came over okay in the Laura Kuenssberg debate. Did you?
I didn't watch it, I'm afraid.
I thought he came over quite well. I think, I think he'd be okay.
Yeah, so you don't mind the focus on immigration. You think that, because Robert Jenrick says that is the key thing that this nation needs to tackle for us to progress and flourish
it's
as a
what
nation.
he wants to do, isn't he? He wants to make it right. It's probably over-ambitious, but...
Interesting that some people in Newark, you know, support him. Some people don't. Newark itself doesn't have a high number of immigrants, but I think Robert Jenrick is thinking the national picture here. Do you agree that immigration is the biggest issue?
No, I don't think it's the biggest issue, but I think our policy on migration has been absolutely bonkers for the last, 14 years since the Conservatives have been in. I mean, I've got two interests in this. One is that I'm actually a son of a migrant. So my mother came from Dublin after the war, or as they called it, the emergency. And she faced racial hostility. You know, she lived in London where you'd see signs saying no blacks, no dogs, no Irish. So she changed her name and she changed her accent in order to try and overcome that. And I'm also a minister in a church where we've got a lot of, we're very multi. I think we have, you know, our songs and our Bible readings are in 4 different languages because we've got such a mixed congregation.
And many of them refugees.
And many of them
asylum
refugees.
seekers, yeah.
And the big thing that we constantly fail to do in this debate is distinguish between refugee migration, so people who are seeking asylum on the one hand, and planned economic migration. And we live in a country now where 1 in 6 people were not born here. Our population has grown by 20% in the last couple of decades. Have we built 20% more houses? No. Have we built 20% more hospitals? No. Have we built 20% more other services? No, we haven't. So this policy has been crazy. And, you know, I mentioned my wife's a GP. 26% of all our doctors in the health service are not UK trained and born. And
is that a bad thing or a good thing?
Well, it means that we're encouraging migration because of our failure to train our own doctors, to train our own nursing staff and so on. And also what we're doing is we're sucking talented and able people out of poor countries. And I think that's immoral. So the whole approach to migration is completely all over the place. And if we're going to have migration, we need to do it consistently and make provision. But why aren't we training our own doctors and nurses? Why aren't we having people working in care homes? Why aren't we having enough people serving coffee in our coffee shops? And to depend on migration to make up for our failures in other areas is just incoherent. And I think taking talented people from other countries is immoral.
But they want to.
Well, let's hear from Will on this.
I just wanted to bring it back to Robert Jenrick, because I think one of the things that you need to know about this guy, unless you've seen it in the news, you know, this is the guy, obviously there was this dodgy stuff about housing when he was housing secretary. He was also the immigration minister, so he's, you know, part of this problem. And don't forget, who is this guy? He's the guy that ordered murals in a detention centre for kids to look at who've just come from war-torn Syria to be painted over just for this. What, you know, why? How would you want somebody like that to be the prime minister of this country? The answer is definitely no.
For you,
you don't want any of them.
No, well, no, of course not.
so as far as having someone local, do you not think there would be some benefit in terms of the profile of our area would be raised?
Absolutely, that would be good.
Setting aside party politics, Will, for the flourishing of Newark and even the East Midlands.
I'm always happy to do that, but, you know, I think Robert Jenrick's been climbing the pole in Parliament for a long time. I don't think he's particularly concerned about Newark, so he wouldn't be doing anything in Newark anyway. So not really worried about that.
Prime Minister a few years ago who came from Grantham.
We did, yes.
I'm not sure that really helped us, so.
Obviously, Robert Jenrick would say he fights very committedly for his constituents. I've been at local events where I have seen him there.
Wow.
So he is visible locally. I can't say how often and how that compares to other MPs. But it's interesting to have this discussion. I want to move us on because we're running out of time on the Notts TV debate. And you've mentioned your wife's a GP. I just want to get your views on whether you would welcome moving to more video appointments, more online video appointments with your GP. So at the moment, there's 1 in 20 that are held via video, so Zoom, Skype, whatever. Could this be the way forward? Because I get the impression that you're more likely to get a telephone appointment with a doctor now, or maybe a pharmacist or a nurse practitioner, than an actual face-to-face appointment. Maybe a video would be better. Or maybe you think, let's keep prioritising face-to-face in surgery appointments. So, Christine, what's your experience like with the GP, and do you welcome maybe more online video
I'd rather
access?
see a GP in person. I think the whole GP system is terrible. I ran for an appointment with a GP, and when I got there, they told me the name of the GP. When I got there, I was in with a nurse, and I thought, how does this work? But then I also think that, you know, when I was young, you got a doctor that cared for you. So when you went back to the doctors, you got that same person. They knew your problems. I mean, now you just see a different doctor every time you go, and a lot of them are trainees. Now I find the whole system is really disappointing. I know they're overstretched. They work hard, but it's just that I don't feel there's one doctor out there that really cares. I think.
Oh, I hope that's not true.
No,
I'm sure they do.
Me personally, I mean, when I'm there, they deal with me properly. I'm not criticising that. But when I go, it's a different doctor. You know what I'm saying? It didn't used to be like that.
They're under quite a lot of pressure, aren't they? And they've got to get through a lot more patients than they used to have to. I mean, that's a fact, isn't it? I think the average doctor now has something like 2,500 patients to see.
But that makes us not
and it was
feel
1,700
really
about 5 years ago.
Well, in that case, you need to pay more tax and have more doctors.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
do need more doctors.
Well, that's not what the Conservative Party are going to do, is it?
Well,
Pay more tax. At a 70-year high, our taxation rate at the moment. Do you think this is a good move forwards, Will? We have the situation. It is a problem. The number of appointments available per population. Video appointments?
So, I mean, I had an appointment that was scheduled end of last year. Very basic thing, and it was pushed back to July this year. I had a letter come through the door, told me it's been pushed back to January next year, and so I've requested it earlier, and I've managed to get a slot somehow. I think it's in the Park Hospital or something. I don't know where, but it's not the one I usually go to. Mm-hmm. So I think it's kind of true what you're saying, that there's not the like family GP kind of thing. But coming back to the online appointments, they need to be flexible about it, because if it's something like a mental health illness, it could be that they want to do it online because there's a reason they can't come in, or it could be they want to do it in person because they don't feel comfortable doing it online. Potentially, if there's another, maybe if somebody's in domestic abuse, they might not want to do something online, they might want to come in person. Mm-hmm. So we need to be flexible with it and be able to make sure that that is kind of accounted for. So.
Yes, I mean, it's interesting, this sort of telephone appointment idea. Does it presumably it must save some time, but you're still sharing what's wrong with you, like you would if you were sat in front of the person. Why have we all suddenly accepted that telephone appointments are the way forward? Even online appointments, why can't we just get in there?
Yeah, the reality is that some things you only need a brief conversation about.
Mm. But you can't have that in the surgery.
Well, in terms of whether videos consultations are as good as in person, I need to defer to my wife's expertise on that. Yeah. I think the thing I'm aware of is that if you're looking at something like a rash or something and you need to actually see it, looking at it online.
I've been asked to send photos in of that sort of thing.
And it's never,
on behalf of my
adequate.
daughter. I don't even want to see it. Send the photo.
But again, what we're trying to do here is address a symptom, ironically, rather than actually get to the underlying cause. Nice little medical metaphor there. I heard on the news 2 days ago that now doctors have 17% more patients to look after each than they did 5 years ago.
That's right, 2,500 versus 1,700.
Absolutely, which is a catastrophe. Yeah. We spend something like 8% of our GDP on our health service. In Germany, they spend 12%. They spend 50% more.
I think it's 11% here, isn't it?
No, I thought it was
okay.
But we are massively underspending. The health service is hugely overstretched. I think the model really isn't working, and we do need to step back and say, hang on, look, is one of these other models of funding that other European countries do, is that going to be more effective? And, after COVID, the government reimposed the cap on the number of doctors going into medical school. When we've got a 30-year shortage of doctors. Why? This is insane.
I mean, I was going to say, one of my friends, she wanted to be a doctor and she couldn't get into the position. But she's more than qualified enough. It's just because it's so competitive. Why is it so competitive? If anyone's qualified, then exactly. You need to increase that ability and train more people.
If you want more medical care, you're going to have to pay more money.
It's been so interesting talking to you. Thank you very much. And sadly, we have come to an end of the time we've got to put Nottinghamshire and the world to rights. So thank you to my panel, to Reverend Dr. Ian Paul, Christine Bacon, Cllr Will Mee. I'm Frances Finn, and don't forget you can tweet and follow us online at notstv.com. Bye for now.